Hey, it's Chris and Brian here from Resolve Technology. And today, Chris is going to talk about SharePoint and OneDrive sync issues and how to sort those out and transfer large amounts of data back and forth. This is a recent ticket we had, so this is part of our Ticket Talk series. And Chris helped to sort this out for a client. So go ahead, Chris, tell us
So
about it.
essentially what happened is some people, we'll start off with the distinction, which we probably mentioned before. OneDrive is the sync client. SharePoint is the cloud collaboration platform. All you use OneDrive for with SharePoint is to synchronize a SharePoint site down from the browser. So if I bring up my browser here, a SharePoint site, this is through the web portal. If you wanted to sync this to OneDrive, you'd need to be signed in on the cloud here, but you'd click sync. Once you do that, it would sync whatever's in here, folder, file, anything. And then if you go into File Explorer, you're not going to see it on mine, but you'll see this Christopher Resolve Technology. There'd be like a little blue building identifying an organization, and that's the OneDrive. And it would just be a folder. So this CK Technology intranet would be a folder in here. And the OneDrive is simply synchronizing whatever's in the cloud here to the desktop for the convenience of the end user. Now, what happens from time to time is, let me bring up a post here. This is regarding OneDrive, but the same concept applies. People come in and say, hey, where's my files in OneDrive or SharePoint? I'm missing files. Where did they go? Essentially what happens is they broke the sync. There could be many reasons. I've seen the sync break because of the file name ends with a space or this trailing space before or after the file name, special characters in file names, or you move too many files, X folder, there's something wrong with it. This is all determined from the sync cloud. Now you'll see this on Mac OS and on Windows, but if you click on the sync cloud here, you'll see, look, your files are synced. If you had a sync issue, there'd be a red X here, and it would tell you what you have to correct. Alternatively, you can reset OneDrive entirely. We'll leave a link to that in this video. I think we've already done a video where you reset OneDrive on Mac and Windows. But if it's not syncing here, you may run into this issue where, hey, we had someone mention our SharePoint site. They sent a client outdated documents that weren't the up-to-date version. What ends up happening is if you make large-scale changes to OneDrive, to SharePoint, and you're doing it locally through that local synchronization with the OneDrive client, you could break the sync, and then all of a sudden everything's out of whack. Whatever changes you made didn't go to the cloud, and nobody else sees them, and you can get into a tricky situation.
So, Chris, can I stop
Yeah.
you there?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of information. So, if you get into that situation where a lot of stuff is out of sync, I guess one of the things you could do is pause the sync on the desktop through the desktop client, right? And would you suggest maybe that they try to make the changes through the web portal?
Yeah, that would be desirable. You'd want to make those changes through this web portal here. That way, once it's updated here, right, then all the clients would synchronize to what's in the web. It'd be cleaner and it's less prone to error. Another thing to mention is, and this guy mentions it on the Microsoft help forum here, despite what Microsoft says, using sync between computer and OneDrive is not a backup. And he mentions the method we actually follow with our clients, which is called the 3-2-1 rule. And he goes on about what exactly that is. I believe we have an existing video explaining why we recommend that. But essentially, this guy's calling it Microsoft propaganda, essentially because when you set up Windows 11 now, it's like start backup. That backup being OneDrive syncing your desktop documents and download. It isn't a backup. And Microsoft is not, we mentioned this before too, if you read the user agreement, they are not responsible for your data. So if you go with the OneDrive client and you change things around, you delete files, and they're not in the SharePoint recycling bin or your OneDrive recycling bin, there's potential data loss, and Microsoft's not getting that data back for you. So a good rule of practice is, yes, do it through the web portal, but have some kind of format standardization, what you're putting in SharePoint, what you're putting in OneDrive. Your local OneDrive is like U files that can be shared out with the client or is more just for you. In SharePoint's your internal or external collaboration, depending on how it's set up. But if you have these systems in place beforehand, you won't have to make massive changes later down the road when you get some kind of creep. You got all these old data files that you don't need, or you have directories that are kind of, it's just chaos. So having some kind of standardization doc for employees to go off of and maybe some training is definitely the way to go to prevent having to do this. And then right next to that would be backing it up. And whether that's a cloud to cloud backup or something like a Synology, you definitely should be backing up your data, because Microsoft is not responsible for it. And the same applies to Google Workspace with Google Drive and Gmail and all that.
So in this situation, we're going to have a hard time helping the client if they do in fact lose data somewhere along the line, because
if they don't have a backup. Yep.
Yeah, in this case, we recommended a couple different solutions for backup. They didn't want to do it right now, so maybe that will change if they lose data here. But our hands are tied if we don't have this backup to go to. Makes it easy though if you can just look at the way things were before, yesterday, the day before, right? And then
Yeah.
we could quickly help the client look at the file structure and be and easily find what's missing. Oh, this folder's missing, that file's missing, right? Still not, I wouldn't say easy, but a lot better, because you won't have data loss. We could reconstruct what they had before.
Another thing is that I'd like to mention, like with this specific client we're talking about, when we originally moved them off the platform, I think they were using iCloud or something on Mac. They got an external drive and backed up the contents of that iCloud before we migrated everything to SharePoint, just in case they were missing something. If you say it's a real small business, you guys don't have backups implemented, you could, in theory, as long as you had a big enough external hard drive, you could connect it to USB and just copy the way everything's configured now, have it sit on there, make your changes in the web, and if for something goes wrong for whatever reason, you have that to fall back on. But I wouldn't consider an external drive a backup either. Those drives could, you know what I mean? You should be following some kind of a 3-2-1 backup method, having 3 copies, 2 local, 1 offsite, etc.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks for showing us that, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yep, have a good one.